What's going on, guys? It's Fight Season MMA, and today I want to make a video talking about my top 10 lowest IQ fighters inside the UFC organization. These are fighters that consistently make you just scratch your head saying, why are you doing this? What is your reasoning? And why are you genuinely putting yourself in a bad position right now in this fight just to either make a very star-studded moment or just genuinely what are you doing in this fight? If you guys enjoy the UFC content, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And please hit the bell just so you guys are always notified when I release UFC content. 97.2% of my viewers who watch my videos are not subscribed, so please go down and hit that subscribe button. It's the best way to support the channel. But let's jump right into the video. Top 10 lowest IQ fighters currently in the UFC organization. At number 10, I have Yair Rodriguez, and you might be thinking, why is Yair Rodriguez on this list? And the reason I have Yair on this list is he never changes his game plan when he's in the fight. If I look at the fight against Brian Ortega, yes, he had a very dominant round one, probably a 10-8 round one, but then Brian Ortega adjusted during that fight, and Yair didn't. He just knew the strategy, worked in the first round, and he's going to stick by that. And in fights, adjusting is the best thing to do possibly. You want to over adjust in fights to beat your opponent to the spot, not just stay in one place. And what did Yair Rodriguez do? He just went in there and he got finished in that third round because he just didn't adjust for the fights. And that's when Brian Ortega started wrestling. That's when he started using his jiu-jitsu and closing up the range. Yair Rodriguez puts himself in firefights, which are super fun. Look at the Max Holloway fight, but if you're in that fight, you just cannot strike with Max Holloway like that. And two, the fight with Korean Zombie, he was losing that fight, and the only reason that we don't talk about that fight as a massive loss is because of that crazy scorpion elbow that he had to knock out him in the first round. But ultimately, Yair Rodriguez makes me scratch my head so much because of his lack of ability of changing up the game plan. At number 9, I have Michel Pereira, and I'm not bashing on Michel Pereira's style because I don't think that he should change what he does inside the UFC octagon because those backflips and everything that he does is insane, but he almost cost himself the fight with Yair Rodriguez at UFC 301 because he shin-faced him during a backflip. Like, how absolutely dumb do you have to be to use your career? And obviously, maybe, yes, you're putting on a show for the fans, but you almost lost your fight because you put your shin in his face on accident because you backflipped and it just landed there. And that could have knocked him out, and that could have caused your fight to be caused a DQ. But ultimately, Michel Pereira is such a fun fighter. He does so many good things inside the octagon, but I still will never forget the fight that Michel Pereira was fighting, and he was doing these backflips, Superman punching off the cage, and he wasted all of his energy in the first round and lost the fight. Like, you cannot genuinely do that type of stuff and go in and lose your fight. He is one of the best middleweights right now, and him moving up from the welterweight division was absolutely necessary because of how massive that guy is. But Michel Pereira just needs to calm down a little bit and just understand that you don't have to do backflips in the cage to be good. And I think that, yes, his style is super fan inclusive. I think that he has some of the best, most fun styles in the UFC organization right now. But ultimately, Michel Pereira is one of the lowest IQ fighters because he puts his fights in jeopardy, like that fight against Yair Rodriguez, where he just absolutely shin-faced him and kneed him in the face on the ground because he backflipped and landed on his head. At number 8, I have Kevin Holland, and Kevin Holland is one of my favorite fighters in the organization, and his kind of lack of skills up there mentally with his IQ makes him such a fun fighter inside the UFC, and that's why we all love him. But striking with Wonderboy and having an agreement saying that you're not going to go to the ground with him is an absolutely just awful thing to do for your career, because Kevin Holland was winning that first round, and he 100% had Wonderboy beat on the jiu-jitsu department. If Kevin Holland went down and was able to use his grappling in that Wonderboy fight, he 100% would have won that fight, no doubt in my mind. And even against Jack Della Maddalena, I think he wanted to prove a point in that striking department, but he could have 100% used that jiu-jitsu on the ground. Look what he did to Michel Oleksiejczuk with the jiu-jitsu. Armbar, craziest armbar of the year, 100%. But you look at also the Michael Venom Page fight, and I think that was a little bit different because he couldn't get to him, but I think Kevin Holland wanted to prove a point of standing on the feet in that first round, and then by the time that second round hit, he took too much damage to really even get there. But Kevin Holland's ego is what makes him so much of a fun fighter, because he wants to stand with some of the best strikers inside the UFC organization, and he just actually got booked against Chris Curtis coming up here on October 7th at UFC 307, I believe it is. But still, Kevin Holland's fan-friendly style does not mean he is one of the highest IQ fighters, just because he does some things that are very questionable inside the UFC octagon. At number 7, I have Rob Font, and if you don't know why Rob Font is on this list, go watch the Corey Sandhagen fight. Rob Font got taken down every single round against Corey Sandhagen, and he lost that fight 50-45 to a guy who had no tricep. And the reason that he lost was because Rob Font did not know how to get up from the bottom. And literally Corey Sandhagen sat on him the entire fight and just laid on him. And truly, Rob Font not knowing how to get up in that bantamweight division is awful. If you think Corey Sandhagen can take you down, imagine what Merab Dvalishvili could do. Imagine what Davidson Figueiredo could do. Henry Cejudo, Umar Nurmagomedov. There are so many different fighters in that UFC organization who are better wrestlers and grapplers than Corey Sandhagen. And Rob Font not knowing how to get off the ground is just a lack of experience for Rob Font in that department. He genuinely looked like a fish out of water on the ground against a very good striker inside the UFC organization. Now, Corey Sandhagen's grappling is something that is extremely improved, and he's fighting this weekend against Umar Nurmagomedov at the main event of UFC Abu Dhabi, the fight night. But still, Rob Font not knowing how to get off the ground in a grappling situation is some of the lowest IQ I've ever seen. He's been in the sport for such a long time, and he should know how to get off the ground by this point. At number 6, lowest IQ fighters currently in the UFC division, I have Tai Tuivasa. And this is kind of a mix between a couple things. Tai Tuivasa versus this fight against Marcin Tybura he got caught in a rear naked choke on his chin. And what did he do? Instead of pushing up, he pulled down. What does pulling down do? It just furthers the rear naked choke to get under the neck, because if he would have pushed up, it would have gone over the chin and it wouldn't have submitted him. But Tai Tuivasa, being big-brained as he is, pulled it down and it went around his neck. Now, Tai Tuivasa has some great wins inside the UFC organization, but in this fight against Cyril Gane that he had, he just started striking with Gane, and he was absolutely defeating him in that category. And I understand that he doesn't have the greatest jiu-jitsu, but he's got to get in the pocket. He's got to do so many different other things. When he was fighting Alexander Volkov, he just was on the ground, and he looked like he was taking a nap down there. Like, he just looked like he was so comfortable tucked into bed, and Volkov was just beating the poop out of him on the top. And truly, that is not a good look for Tai Tuivasa. So I think if any fighter went in there and fought Tai Tuivasa, like, can you imagine Jailton Almeida versus Tai Tuivasa? Like, I know Almeida has no striking game whatsoever, but there's no way he gets out of the first round. Like, if he submits Jairzinho Rosenstruck in the first round, Tai Tuivasa is going to get absolutely mauled by Jailton Almeida. But ultimately, Tai Tuivasa is still a really fun fighter. He swings for the fences. He's one of the blobs inside the UFC organization, but truly, he is not one of the greatest fighters on the ground. At number 5 inside the UFC organization, I have Anthony Smith, and this is nothing because Anthony Smith is genuinely a high IQ fighter inside the octagon, but if you look at how he takes fights, it is some of the lowest IQ things I've ever seen. He took a short notice replacement against Khalil Roundtree Jr. last December and got absolutely pummeled because he took it on 2 weeks' notice against one of the best up-and-coming prospects in the UFC, who already had a fight booked. He had a fight booked and then took it because he thought that he could beat him in that standpoint. You can't come off a training camp doing that and just understand that he is one of the best upcoming fighters. You got to understand your situation. And he took a short notice against Roman Dolidze in this fight, and he genuinely looked gas. He looked ill-prepared to come in and take this fight at UFC 303. Anthony Smith's ability and want to jump inside the octagon on short notice is something that is absolutely crazy. I like after the Khalil Roundtree Jr. fight, Anthony Smith said he would never jump in on short notice again, and then UFC rolls around and he jumps in on 10 days notice to get absolutely smacked by Roman Dolidze. It just is one of the lowest brained IQ things I've ever seen inside the octagon. Someone who's trying to gather the title and just genuinely won't go and take his time to do it. I understand Anthony Smith is older, but you don't have to jump in on short notice to go get that title. But Anthony Smith's lack of knowledge on when to jump inside the UFC octagon is just truly just alarming in my opinion, and that's why he's number 5 on the lowest IQ fighters. At number 4 on this list, I have King Green. King Green just really baffles me with what he did against Paddy Pimblett and against Jalin Turner. I'll start with Jalin Turner. He was fighting one of the best sharpshooters in the UFC lightweight division, and King Green went in there and said, I'm going to strike with him. There's nothing that's going to stop me. And he was getting lit up on the feet, and he's like, nope, I got this. Hold my beer. I'm going to go strike with this man. What happens? Gets laid out and almost killed because the ref doesn't stop the fight. And then against Paddy Pimblett this weekend, he was like, well, striking is not going as planned. I'm only going to shoot a takedown on one of the best jiu-jitsu artists in the UFC lightweight division. If you look at how good Paddy Pimblett's jiu-jitsu is, it is some of the best in the UFC lightweight division. You can say whatever you want about Paddy Pimblett, that he doesn't have any cardio, he's not a great striker, he's a little bit fat. Paddy Pimblett's jiu-jitsu is absolutely world-class, and he needs to be up there with some of the best jiu-jitsu artists in the UFC lightweight division. And what happens? Bobby Green takes a nice nap. He looked like he was curled up in a blanket right there against Paddy Pimblett, holding him in a triangle, or was it a triangle choke, as Paddy Pimblett was shaking his arm, trying to break it with an arm bar as well. He got double submitted in that standpoint, but Bobby Green's want to just strike against Jalin Turner to prove a point, and then go to the ground to show Paddy Pimblett that he's a better jiu-jitsu artist than him is genuinely some of the lowest IQ practices in the UFC I've ever seen, and that is why Bobby Green is number 4 on my UFC lowest IQ fighters list. At number 3, I have Johnny Walker, and there needs to be no explanation on why Johnny Walker is one of the lowest IQ fighters inside the UFC organization. He has a chin of paper, and that doesn't have to do with IQ, but throwing flying knees and wheel kicks and crescent kicks and axe kicks, understanding that you're going to get close to some of these big power punchers inside the UFC. He just fought Volkan Oezdemir and got put to sleep because he was doing all this stupid stuff inside the UFC octagon, to where Johnny Walker needs to know that he has to protect his chin more than any other fighter pretty much in the UFC, because he's fighting in such a division where there's so much power going around, and his chin is made out of absolute paper. So it just really baffles me on why Johnny Walker isn't more cognizant of how bad his chin is inside the UFC octagon, because if Johnny Walker understood that his chin was genuinely that bad, I think he would get a lot more wins inside the UFC, because he would protect himself. He would go to different practices to really understand that, he needs to just keep that chin. Magomed Ankalaev just knocked him out with one punch and then just slapped him on the ground because Johnny Walker's chin was so bad. But he wanted to strike with Magomed, and he wanted to strike with Volkan Oezdemir, and he wants to strike with Jamal Hill, and he wants to do some crazy things. But Johnny Walker ultimately is one of the lowest IQ fighters for his lack of protection over his chin. At number 2, I have Jalin Turner, and the only thing I have to point out is Jalin Turner has made some very questionable decisions inside the UFC. Yes, he had that massive win over Bobby Green that I kind of talked about earlier, about talking about why Bobby Green was so just low IQ'd, but genuinely, Jalin Turner's fight against Renato Moicano, and I understand of why he was doing it, but Jalin Turner lands a massive knockdown on Renato Moicano, sends him to the ground, and what does he do? Doesn't try to finish him, just walks away. You cannot do that inside the UFC, and he's had a bunch of different things that he wants to go for the walk-off knockout, but to genuinely go in there, to sit someone down, and then to walk off when you're on the biggest stage in the UFC is absolutely crazy. Now, it wouldn't have been thought of as low IQ if Jalin Turner didn't lose this fight, but it's not like Jalin Turner lost by decision. Jalin Turner got TKO'd in this fight literally 5 minutes later, because he took his opportunity for granted in the standpoint. But ultimately, Jalin Turner has to genuinely understand that you got to take every opportunity inside the UFC. As for what it is, he could be up in the rankings. He could be fighting Benoit Saint-Denis right now at UFC Paris, but Jalin Turner was too low IQ to understand the moment that he was in. At number 1, lowest IQ fighters inside the UFC organization, I say it so much, that is my boy, Michael Chandler, the man who goes in to die inside the octagon. This man has the best wrestling, or some of the best wrestling in the UFC organization, and when does he use it? I have never seen a time that Michael Chandler uses it. The only time he used it versus Dustin Poirier is that first round. He got cracked at the end of it, and he's like, oh, probably shouldn't stand with one of the best strikers in the UFC. Let me take him down. Against Justin Gaethje, he's like, nah, I'm getting pieced up on the feet. I'm just going to go and, I'm just going to go take him down. And, I'm just going to, no, he just stood with him and was getting battered on the feet. And he was just walking in the shots. Michael Chandler in that Justin Gaethje fight wanted to prove a point. He didn't even have his hands up, and Gaethje's punching him in the face, and he's just walking into fight and walking into strikes. Michael Chandler, I just don't understand his brain sometimes of how he just walks into strikes. And 2, he's waiting for Conor McGregor, and I understand he wants that fight, but Michael Chandler has been out since UFC 281. In my recollection, UFC 281 was headlined by Adesanya versus Pereira 1 in UFC Madison Square Garden in 2022. That was the headliner in 2022, and it is currently July 2024, which is absolutely insane that Michael Chandler has waited this long to get back inside the UFC octagon. That is 100% all these reasons is why Michael Chandler is my king of the lowest IQ fighters inside the UFC organization. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA and my top 10 lowest IQ fighters currently inside the UFC organization. I will rank them quickly just to recap. I got Yair Rodriguez at 10, Michel Pereira at 9, Kevin Holland at 8, Rob Font at 7, Tai Tuivasa at 6, Anthony Smith at 5, Bobby Green at 4, Johnny Walker at 3, Jalin Turner at 2, and Michael Chandler at 1. If you guys enjoy the content, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribing is the best way to support the channel. And just a reminder, 97.2% of my viewers are not subscribed. So please go down there and hit that subscribe button. It is the best way to support the channel since we're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And it would mean so much if you guys went down there and hit the subscribe button just to support the channel. But thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Fight Season MMA. Please hit the bell just so you guys are always notified when content releases soon. I've probably got some more content coming today. So please go hit that subscribe button and that bell. Thank you guys so much for watching. And I will see you guys very, very soon with more UFC content and news.